Hi, it's Kristen. This week on the 10 to 20 podcast, we have Dr. Tracy Bennett, who oversees the Get Kids Internet Safe program. And she and I are going to kind of continue the conversation that Doreen and I had last week, but take it a step further, because one of the things that parents probably don't know their kids are doing is sending inappropriate images, videos, and texts to members of the opposite sex, as well as their own friends. And once those images and texts get into the wrong hands, lots of bad things can happen, including and up to sex trafficking. I know it's a scary topic, but you definitely need to know what's going on. And Tracy gives you some tips on how to better control what your kids are getting into. So thanks for being here, and let's get to today's show. Hi, it's Kristen Dokas with 10 to 20 Parenting, and you are listening to the 10 to 20 Talk Radio podcast. This week I've got guest Dr. Tracy Bennett from Get Kids Internet Safe. And now that I have finally gotten that full sentence out of my mouth without stumbling, if you weren't around, so you didn't hear that. But welcome, Tracy. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for being patient in my inability to speak coherently this morning. You would think at 12:20 in the afternoon that I'd be good, but apparently I just need I've either had too much coffee or not enough. I'm going to stand by. I haven't had enough. So, welcome, and please let's take a few minutes and introduce you to our listeners. Go ahead. That's you.
Okay, all right.
See, it's not just me, everybody.
I was trying to figure out if I'm doing the intro.
Now it's your turn.
I will intro myself. I'm Dr. Tracy Bennett. I'm a mother of 3. I have a daughter who's 21, a daughter who's 13, and a son who's 11. And I've been a clinical psychologist in private practice for over 20 years. And I treat kids and teens, families, and adults. I have a pretty broad-based practice. And I also teach at California State University, Channel Islands. I teach addiction studies and clinical abnormal psych. And I created Get Kids Internet Safe for 2 reasons. One is I had to build a program for my own kids because there was an enormous difference between raising my 21-year-old versus my 11-year-old. Things had changed so much in just that 10 years.
In 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. In 1 year.
Yeah, 6 months.
Yeah. And then also my practice was blowing up with really serious internet safety issues. And parents weren't talking because they were so ashamed. And I just felt like, somebody has got to get the word out. And I was having a hard time reaching enough people. So a friend of mine approached me and said, "Why don't you go on the web?" And I said, I will give that a shot. And so that's where I'm at, to reach a big audience.
So in our pre-show, we kind of tossed around several ideas of topics we wanted to talk about. And the one that we kind of honed in on is a phrase that I think those of us in the industry know, but a lot of parents may not know, which is sexploitation. And what would you define sexploitation to be?
Sexploitation is when you take somebody's image or a video or something very intimate and you use that as blackmail. So internet predators will often groom their victims and say, "You're really beautiful. Show me what you're wearing today. And isn't it hot outside? How about your bikini? Let me see your bikini." And then eventually groom them into inappropriate pictures and then sexploit them with it. So they'll say, if you don't send me another, I'm going to tell your mom.
Right.
Or if you don't send another, I'm going to post it on the internet.
And it's not just girls, it is boys as well. However, the largest population obviously affected by that are girls, our daughters. They're easy targets. I hate to say it, but they are. And again, this is your expertise, but at that age, what age would you say is most frequent of this?
I think around 13, 14.
Yeah.
Middle school is really when things get tough because the kids, that's for peer sexploitation because the kids are really trying to define who they are and they play pretty dirty sometimes.
Well, and they
And
also
they just don't have the maturity to understand
right,
consequence.
right, and that's something that
They just don't get it.
they don't, and that Doreen and I talked about that last week in our podcast, which is that maturity level. There's so many factors here, and that being one of the biggest is they don't have that level of maturity. And I also think this is a time of their life where they're starting to pull away from their parents. So they're not going to come to their parents and say, even though they know it's probably smarmy and not, it makes their gut feel not right, because they're trying to establish that independence from their parents. I can make these decisions. I'm in charge of myself. I'm a big kid now. They don't go to their parents. So that's, in my experience, most of these parents have no idea this is going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many factors that keep kids closeted with their behavior. One is their brain development, your prefrontal lobe, which is that part of your brain that allows you to see consequence and problem solve. That's not fully mature until 23. And I think parents overestimate the judgment of their kids. So I hear often, my child would never do that, but I hear a lot of other kids do. And you'd be surprised how many well-adjusted, intelligent, great kids fall into the trap of bad screen media behavior. And so it's not just brain behavior, but it's also culture. Middle school is they actually say don't tell your parents oftentimes, so it's a rule not to go talk to your parents about things that happen. And then the third thing is they defend themselves by doing the same thing, and then they're a culprit also, and it silences them with shame. So oftentimes you see cyberbullying with the kid, and the kid and his friends or her friends will cyberbully back. And before you know it, it's a total rumble. Like everybody's cyberbullying everybody. And at that point, they're in so deep, they don't want to tell any adults because everybody's going to get in trouble.
Right. There can also be, and I don't know if a lot of parents are aware of this, there can also be legal ramifications to these kind of pictures going around.
Oh, the truth is, I mean, the internet is the Wild West right now in regard to law enforcement and regulation. There's very little out there. It's inconsistent between state. It's inconsistent within the same community. I think police officers are really reticent to convict or to investigate kids, right? So they're vulnerable for child pornography charges, but nobody wants to have a 15-year-old listed on the sex offender list. Right. Because they were exchanging photos with their young boy girlfriend or girlfriend.
Right. So
it's a tough time.
It is. And, the other side to this too, and one that I know very well, just as being a parent and talking to other parents and doing some boot camps with parents, is a lot of times there's so many variables as to why this is happening, but one of the biggest is because parents are so unfamiliar with the technology and the sites themselves that they have no idea. They just, even if they had an idea and wanted to monitor it, there's some, Snapchat's a great one, that they can and Kick. I mean, there's so many sites out there, or, apps, not even sites, apps that kids are using that can just go undetected by the parents. They can come up with aliases. So you're going to go looking for your child's name, right? That would be the most logical. But then there's all the aliases. That's one of the big things with Tumblr that I advise parents on, is like the public profile for Tumblr, the original profile for your Tumblr account has to be public, right? But then you can create all these sub accounts on your Tumblr, sub pages can be private, and that's where it's not the public stuff that's getting that you're looking at. It's the private other pages that these kids are creating or can create. What advice would you have for parents on that?
Oh boy, I could spend hours on that. I mean, the truth is, kids can get in trouble with texting. Yeah. Often I try to talk to parents about their misconceptions, and a lot of parents go, oh, well, I don't need to worry about my kid because they're not on social media. Well, some of my most dangerous situations have happened playing solitaire and texting alone. Yeah. So that all by itself renders them vulnerable, but you're right, social media opens up a whole new quagmire of problems. And some are monitorable and others aren't.
Right.
If they have a chat feature, you're in some trouble. If it has video or image capability, there's risk. And just like you said, if there's fake profiles or anonymity possible, then it really goes rampant. So um, my primary goal for Get Kids Internet Safe is to spread awareness to parents, to give a lot of free information, not only about what's going on out there, so they can discuss it with their kids and build their kids' resilience and build their assertiveness with connection instead of threat, but also to get them more comfortable with tech, because you really have to stay a step ahead of your child. And what parents do is they either bury their head and give full permissiveness, or they lock them down and they're intrusive and spying, and that damages the connection. Usually parents flip back and forth between the two. So if you have a plan from the beginning where you're educated and you're comfortable, then you can kind of start from a foundation of cooperation and lead your kid instead of chasing along behind them, putting out fires.
What is your professional opinion and your mom opinion on monitors? Which don't, just disclaimer, everybody, that doesn't catch everything. I get a lot of parents who ask me, what's the best app? What's the best monitor I can put on our computers or our phones, etc.? Which one is the best?
That's my daughter walking behind us. That's my 21-year-old.
The 13?
No, that's my 21-year-old.
Oh my gosh.
She's home right now. She doesn't know but she'll figure it out. Okay, so monitors. To be really honest with you, this is a controversial topic, and I'm still conflicted about it. I just had a debate with a security guy who is a consultant for parents with web security, and his position on it is interesting. Was different than mine. His position was, you tell your kids from the beginning at 11 or 12, I'm going to monitor everything you do online. Just so you know, everything you type, everything you do, I'll be monitoring it. And then he said, and then he doesn't tell them again, because they'll just forget it. And that way he'll have access to information as it comes across their phone, and he can intervene as appropriate. Because if they know he's monitoring and he's reminding them all the time, they'll just get on the phone and do workarounds so that they can't figure it out. And he'd rather kind of secretly monitor so that he can catch them at it.
Right.
My position's different than that, and partly because I treat teens and I see what kind of damage that kind of secret spying and ambushing does, in my opinion. I totally get why parents want that kind of control, and believe me, because I treat victims. So there's a very legitimate argument for that. But my position is that you tell them you're monitoring them and you remind them fairly consistently. You just don't give them your playbook. Right? So I think it's important to, let them know, use your best judgment, because it's not just me monitoring you all the time. Yes. But there's all kinds of other parents and teachers and law enforcement and school administration and other kids that your stuff that you think is private is being passed around everywhere. So whatever you write, it could end up in grandma's hands or your school counselor's hands or your teacher's hands or the boy you like or the girl you like. So I really believe that dialogue should be ongoing and cooperative.
Yes.
So that your kids aren't like trying to work around you, but they know that you're on it. Right. And they have kind of a bit of a censor, whatever's possible with that immature prefrontal lobe. Because even if they know, it's fascinating what I see in clinical practice, because the kids will tell me, I know my mom's reading all my texts. And I'll be like, then how is it that you're sexting your girlfriend so explicitly if you know your parents are reading it? And they're like, meh, they deserve to read it if that's what they want. See what they're going to do. So even if you're monitoring, a lot of times the kids will still push. Yeah. So you're going to catch them anyway, number one. And number two, my hope is that if you're reminding them often, that they just kind of throw up their hands and go, you know what, it's not worth going to that much effort if I'm going to get caught. So I'm going to pick a better route.
But this goes back to the a problem, quote unquote, that we discussed a few minutes ago, that there are so many parents that are not active on social media. I am. That's my job. I am, and my kids know there is nothing they can do that I don't know, right? Now, I don't very rarely do I comment or share or like. The most active for my kids is Snapchat and Twitter and Instagram, but they're pretty nefarious on Instagram. It's just kind of, and they really don't post a lot, which tells me they're posting a lot on the sites that aren't necessarily seen by parents. I would say 98% of the parents I come in contact are not on Twitter. They don't even know what the Twitter is, and that's where kids are. And every once in a while, my oldest will send something out, and all I have to do is, and I'll reply to her and say, really? And she, at one point, Tracy, she even changed her bio on Twitter to say, hi, Mom.
Yeah, they don't like us. I appreciate that you have restraint in how much that you don't publicly shame her on social media. Because I had a different experience with my 21-year-old. See, my youngest ones I haven't allowed on yet because my middle, she's 13. And until she really pushes, I am not going to have her go there. And so far, she's my kid who's like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. But my oldest, in those days, all there was Facebook. And I ended up taking her Facebook because it was distracting her from her homework temporarily. And, she decided on her own that it was too much of a distraction and didn't go on. So by the time she went back on it, she was old enough to decide whether she wanted me to be her friend or not. And she did not friend me for a long time. She didn't. She said, look, my whole life is public. My family knows everything I do. This is something I want to do on my own. And by then she was 17.
Right.
So I was like, okay, and then later, now she's 21. Eventually, with my pleading and begging and her refusing me, eventually she did friend me, and we followed each other since. But with little ones, they have no choice. Like if I allow them that social media, not only am I friended, but I'll have their username and password so I can go in as if I'm them and check their activity, because they can cut parents out. Especially Snapchat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Snapchat's easy. There's no monitoring system for Snapchat that I know of.
No, there really isn't. And that's where the conversation comes into play. What are some good guidelines that we can give our kids when it comes to, I guess, just the only way to say it, taking your clothes off. Other than don't do it. Because there have been some really very public cases, and I think, wasn't it just here recently that a young lady killed herself, committed suicide over some of the issues that had happened and there have been several kids who've committed suicide.
Many social media suicides. We had one in our community not long ago. Yeah. And we had a bomb scare 2 weeks ago from a middle school Twitter or tweet that went out. And here's the story with that. So a middle schooler was tweeting with all his friends and made a bomb threat. And the only way it got found out is somebody's uncle was in Turkey on vacation and saw it on Twitter and then called in to our community in California. So Twitter is a very active social media site. It's not close to as popular as Facebook and Instagram. And it varies by community. But Twitter is a really active cyberbully site in our community. I have high schoolers come in and say, and they'll talk about watching the cyberbullying happening and how distressing it is to them. And I'll say, why didn't you step in? And they're like, I tried. It was just out of control, and I didn't want to become the target. And I'll say, well, why didn't you report it to the administration? And they say, well, will you? And I said, do you really want me to call the high school and have them check on this kid? And they'll say, yeah, please do, because I'm really worried about this kid. We had one the other day where an older brother was hassling a kid who was dating his younger sister. And everybody was kind of chiming in. And the kid said, I know I'm a dirtbag. I feel really terrible. I don't deserve to live. And then he kind of went away out of the string. And it was scary, It was hard to tell how affected this kid was. And you could see him decline in his self-concept based on what everybody was saying. And, he hadn't really, nobody deserves that kind of public shaming and shunning. And adults are doing it to each other too.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a social justice issue to this. My most, I think I was telling you earlier, my most popular article to date was published by the Good Men Project, and it's titled, "Hey Dad, your 12-year-old has a nude out." And I wrote it pretty neutrally, and I thought there's no way this is going to be controversial. And it still was, which is fascinating to me. I'm thinking, how could you not think that's concerning? But there's a lot of discussion to be had. Anyway, back to your question. Your question was, how do we protect our kids from releasing intimate photos? And I think that you have to start discussing sex ed and intimacy and judgment and impulse very young, and have an ongoing dialogue with kind of role play opportunities. So you say,
I'm a big believer in role play.
Yeah. So you say around dinner, like, don't make it a big, huge ordeal. Just part of everyday family conversation. Like, hey, you guys, guess what I came across in an article today? This happened to this one kid. What do you think he should have done? What do you think she should have done? What would you do? And always let it be okay for your kid to fail. Like, get in the habit of having a sense of humor about your own failures and theirs, so that when they do mess up, and I promise you they will, if they're smart, curious kids in the world, they're going to mess up. And they have to know that they can come to you and you're not going to be terribly ashamed and lock them in a tower for the rest of their lives, and that you're not going to take over for them. That's the hardest part. And I know, as being a mom, it's really hard. My 13-year-old was kind of being bullied inappropriately for a little bit. And I was like, do you want me to step in? And she said, no, I've got this handled. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do? And she told me, and I'm like, I think you should do it like this. And she's like, no, I'm not going to do it your way, Mom. No. And I made a decision to step back. And I said, if it gets worse, honey, I may need to step in, but go ahead. You're a smart girl. You're very capable. You know a lot more about what's going on than I do. You know the players, and adult solutions don't always work with kids. So go give that a shot. And what she did worked, and I didn't have to do it. And then I got to praise her and go, wow, you're amazing. You did that on your own. You did your own problem solving. You asserted yourself. I'm so proud of you. You can do this. And you included me. And then you're in with them and they're connecting with you and they keep you in the loop, so you have influence. If you're too harsh, they'll cut you out of the loop.
And that brings up such a great point. And I think a lot of parents have not hit this learning point yet. I did very early on, of course, typically with our oldest. That's the one we learned with, is that they don't need us to step in. And parents, because so many parents have not made that transition from parent to coach and counsel, is that if you try to step in and solve the problems, they're never going to learn it. Like you said, they're never going to learn how to deal with conflict resolution. It takes away their that feeling of, I know, because you're right. We only know their side of it. I stepped in one time, and that was a mistake, and I've never stepped in again. I kind of go through that same conversation. What are you going to do? How does it make you feel? What are you going to do about it? What's your approach? How are you going to handle it? And I go, if you need my help, I'm here.
Yeah, I tell this story fairly often in my practice, and not just to kids and teenagers, but to adults too. As a psychologist, people often, Dr. Phil kind of really skewed the public perception of what we do. So people come in and they say, all right, give me advice. Like, you're an expert, give me advice. That's not really what therapy is. Therapy is a lot more powerful than that, because I don't know what's going on in people's lives. They're the experts. So what I came across really early in my career is how arrogant it is and how belittling it is to step in and do something for somebody. It really, we call it infantilizes. It makes them seem smaller than us. Like, you need my expertise, so I'm going to jump in and take over. That's the last thing you want for your child. You want to empower your child, right? So you want to be their coach, not their helicopter parent.
Right. That's
so
exactly
instead
right.
of being arrogant and pushing them down and saying, you step aside and I'll take care of this for you because you're not capable, instead you want to go, wow, what are you going to do? Do you need help laying out your options? Let's talk it through. And look, sometimes you just have to acknowledge there is no good outcome here.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
You're in a pickle. This is going to be painful. How's it going to be least painful? And I have your back 100% no matter what. It's the only way my patients will talk to me is because I have their back no matter what. When they come in, if they screwed up, we're going to talk about it. I'm not going to shame them. We're going to talk it through because it's an excellent learning opportunity. In fact, I welcome it. They'll make fun of me because they'll be like, "You're going to love this, Dr. Bennett. Guess what I got myself into?" And I'm like, awesome learning opportunity.
Right.
Good for getting out there. Good for giving it a shot. And then it's grist for the mill. Then you get influence.
Yeah.
And they need us for that.
Well, and it also, by jumping in and saving the day, like you said, it makes them go, okay, every time I go to mom or dad with a problem, they start shutting you out. They're not going to come to you anymore because I think they inherently know what the right approach is. Because the other thing that I know is my kids aren't perfect. And the story that I'm hearing, I guarantee, is only half of it. It's filtered information. So I can't even give you my best advice because I don't know all the facts.
And the moms I like to hang out with, the parents I like to hang out with, are the ones who, when you say, wow, there was an issue, they go, what did my kid do?
Me. That was me.
Because it's the parents who say, my little sweetheart is the victim all the time. They're delusional.
Oh my gosh.
All the kids get into a mess. The grown-ups get into a mess.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not perfect getting through these conflicts either.
Let me tell you, and this is, we've got just probably about 5 or 6 more minutes, but let's talk about these parents because there was a situation in our area earlier this year in the winter where there was a scuttlebutt going on Twitter amongst the high school students over something. It doesn't matter what it was. And again, here's me watching from, outside the circle because I'm not a teenager. I'm not at this high school. And one of the moms decided to jump in and start taking the kids that are in it because she felt her son had been affronted, and it turned nasty. I mean, she even had, there were even kids that were saying, Mrs. So-and-so, with the utmost of respect, you are not a high school senior and you don't go to our school. And she was nasty. It takes a lot for me to go, oh my God. But I was like, holy cow. That's not what I said. It was actually quite more colorful than that. But I was like, screenshots galore. Everybody, and of course she went back and deleted the tweets, but oh well, guess what? That's what we call screenshots. And I took some because I was like, I couldn't believe that she actually jumped into this. And oh my God, I felt so bad for her son.
Yeah, and once you jump in, like you said, those screenshots, they're there forever. Even if you delete it, it's still there. And, I get it. Nothing means more to me than my kids. I love them. Nobody makes me madder and nobody makes me happier than them. So I get how she kind of got swept away with it. But we all learned from our first, that you have to trust them more than that. You got to step back a little bit and be in the background.
And you have to be an adult.
Mm-hmm.
That is that's the difference between kids in high school and us as parents. You have to, the only thing that makes us not civil is the ability to make rational, you have to be able to say, yeah, I want to do that, but as the adult, I can't do that.
Well, and here's the truth that parents need to know, honestly. It's a mistake typically. Okay, every situation's different, but typically it's a mistake to go to other parents. People go to other parents thinking the parents will be reasonable and go, oh, okay, let's discuss this. That doesn't always happen. A lot of times they'll be defensive and it turns into a disaster. If there's an issue on social media, go to the school administration. The school administration, they're trained. They manage it every day. They know how to handle it. And they play a beautiful middleman mediator. Mm-hmm. It's better for parents because it used to be that you should kind of handle stuff on your own and only pull the school in when there's a really serious issue. But when it comes to screen media and social media, they're experts. They know what they're doing and we don't.
Right.
So it's better to just turn it over to the school, give them the information, and let them know. And then you handle your family. You handle your kids.
Right, and that's exactly. You can't go out and school, somebody else's kids. I mean,
That's
that's just a one-way ticket to doom. And because I would get upset. I mean, let me tell you something. Had she said to this child, had she said what she said to my kid, it would have been a very, very. I mean, I would have taken quite a different approach.
See, and that's why I was trying to have compassion for her, because imagine, I don't know how she was provoked, because sometimes, she might have been provoked in a way that made her kind of lose it.
Yeah.
She may be a very reasonable person, but you don't know what she was up against when she made those decisions. Right. So the trick is for us to all support each other and not shame each other too much, because then we turn into the bullies too.
Well, yeah, exactly. But as it goes back to, it's also, my responsibility as a parent to protect my child.
Yeah.
So anyhow, okay, so we're closing in on the end of our program. It's been very insightful. I want you to have the opportunity to talk a little bit more about what you're doing with your program and how people can get in touch with you. And I will also be putting all these links in the show notes of the blog post.
Thank you so much. All right, so I've been writing articles to give a lot of free information to parents. So I have, if you go to getkidsinternet.safe.com and put in your email address, you get a free article a week. And I have many, many. And those articles are useful because it gives you the information you need to discuss things with your kid and build the connection. That's your very strongest power source with your kids. So I have the blog. And then also, I'm going to be launching Get Kids Internet Safe Quick Start Kit, which is a 17-minute video where I go over how to stage your house. The simplest and most powerful, quick
and that's an important thing, yeah.
Oh, it's huge. And it's for parents with kids who are little and parents with older kids too, because if you set these parameters and guidelines, it increases the chance that they're going to be accountable and that you can supervise appropriately. And then after that, I'm going to be releasing the 30 Days to Internet Safety. And that is a big course. That's 6 videos. That goes over everything you possibly need to get screen media safe. That goes over forming a connection with your kids, the tech setup that you need, and the advanced parenting strategies to keep all of that in place during, as they get older. So I developed it flexibly so that it would work with parents with little kids all the way up to teens.
Fantastic. And a much needed resource too. So again, we'll be putting all of those links for Tracy on the show notes. And that's it. That's our show for this week. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. Please make sure you subscribe to our podcast either on iTunes or Stitcher. If you could leave us a review and a rating on iTunes, we'd really appreciate it. That just helps other parents find our podcasts as a great resource for parenting. Don't forget to leave us a comment. Please send us a tweet. If you have a question, you can always send us an email, and you can find these kind of topics and more at our site. There goes my tongue twisting again, 10to20.com. And again, Dr. Tracy Bennett, thank you so much for joining us.
I want to say thank you for having me on, but also thank you for focusing on this age. I think there's very little out there. And we need you. The tween years and the teen years are among the hardest to parent, and there's not a lot of resources. So thank you for 10 to 20.
Hey, thank you so much for being a part of it. I foresee a lot of collaborative efforts between us because we're definitely on the same mindset of protecting this age group. So, all right, that's it. Until next week, remember that the time between 10 and 20 is really just an age and not a sentence.